Well, good morning to everybody on the other side of the pond. It's mid-afternoon here in Scotland. In fact, it's 4:30 in the afternoon. So, I'm just going to crack on. A lot of you will know that Ken Kratz very generously suggested that I had one legitimate question to put to him. Obviously, having messaged him quite a few times and him sent messages back, it's clear that he had no intention of ever answering any question. Probably the most sensitive was the computer. You know, if you've got a computer that you have identified as being Brendan Dassey's computer, which we now find discovered since the trials, wasn't his, it was more used by Bobby, and some of the images involved. If he had thought that those images could be attributable to searches by Brendan, then obviously he would have used those in trial against Brendan. But he chose not to. But of course, he chose not to answer that particular question and a lot of others besides. So anyway, here's the hopefully the final message from Mr. Kratz. He put, was there a reason why you decided to read books by people who had nothing to do with the Avery murder trial in favor of those who sat on the sidelines and threw insults? Who's he referring to? Obviously, Sean Atwood, who I think the animosity between each other is mutual. But I know that even though he's a Man United fan, I'm going to side with Sean Atwood. He carried on. It only took 2 questions from me. Well, Ken, I asked you plenty before that. It only took 2 questions from me, and your agenda rose to the surface like the head on a pint. Sadly, I'm afraid our, in inverted commas, conversation is over. This I did like, however. May I suggest exchanging quips with Miss Zellner? She will like your style. Well, thanks, Ken. I appreciate that. My reply was rather blunt. Dear Ken, my agenda has been and always will be to seek out the truth. Sadly, as with the wrongful convictions of Steve and Brendan, you see things purely and simply as a public opinion exercise. Okay. So anyway, that's Ken Kratz dealt with. I've got a whole load of list of stuff here that I want to go through. First of all, I'm in various Facebook support groups, out of which obviously you get these groups, and I'm in quite a few of them. And I just happened to let slip on one occasion that there was in fact one group that I'm in with a few other people that's all dudes. Yes, we discuss making a murderer a lot, but we also discuss a lot of other things. And to be perfectly honest, there are things that we're quite happy to discuss amongst ourselves, which, shall we say, ladies present, I'm sure you can understand. But of course, some ladies don't necessarily share that opinion. So something rather funny happened. I think it was the middle of the week. Myself and somebody else in a group that we were in, we got kicked off as admins of that group. We got removed by, I should say, the chairperson of presumably the ladies only executive committee. But seriously, kind of joking. Basically what we did, or what the ladies did, was they said, look, enough of this, you posting to 25 different groups. You're just duplicating a lot. Just cut it down so it's just down to half a dozen. So anyway, the streamlining of the support groups has been good. Hi, Deb. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there was no way that Ken Kratz was ever going to engage in any kind of question answering. He was always going to twist any question I put to him as being this, you're only seeing one side of the argument. That was never going to happen. So anyway, the streamlining of the messenger groups is a good thing. However, it was a while back. As some of you know, one of the bees, I suppose you could say, that I have in my bonnet is over the effectiveness of the various attorneys. They're public figures. There's nothing to do with it, but they get paid quite well. That they're not on poverty's door. So here's a question for you, which I put to some of the guys in the group, and I won't tell you who they are and what their answer was. Unfair of me. But I want you to imagine that you were wrongfully convicted. Now, you can make up your own scenario as to how that happened, whether you're a juvenile, whether you've given a coerced confession, whether whether you had a bonfire and 10 days later a whole load of bones appear. You make up your own scenario. It could be in the future, because you can. I'll come to that. But you've been wrongfully convicted. Who of the attorneys that we know would you choose to try and get you out? Who would be the one that you would place most faith in? Okay, so you've got a choice of Dean Strand, or you can only choose one. You're not getting a team of, because one of them works very much by herself. You get Dean Strand or Jerry Buting or Steve Glynn. Can't imagine there'll be much votes for him. He said that he thought that Steve was actually guilty. Walt Kelly. Now, this will be obviously important to some people, because if you've been convicted on a coerced confession, Steve Drizzen or Laura Nyrider, you don't get the pair of them. You get to choose one. Just for fun, Mike Griesbach, who is now a defense lawyer. In fact, I think for a while Ken Kratz became an attorney, and I'm sure he set up his own private law practice. Therefore, he is also a possible defense attorney. I suppose from his point of view, if you know how to frame somebody, you must surely then know how you can get them off. So where do we get to? Yes, Michael Griesbach, Ken Kratz. You can have Ken Kratz if you like. Kathleen Zellner, and let's just for the fun of it, let's imagine it's 20 years in the future, and Mr. Ericosi has fulfilled his dream of becoming a private investigator. However, he's even gone on to set up his own law firm. And he is one of the hotshots. He is one of the best you can get. Okay, so your choice is one of those. How many is that? Stram, Butin, Glenn, Kelly, Drizzen, Nyrider, Griesbach, Carpenter, Eric Rosie, Ken Kratz. You get a choice of 10. One of those 10. That's all you're getting. Okay. Thorny issues. One of the real thorny issues, undoubtedly, is the one that keeps cropping up everywhere you go. Is Teresa Halbach still alive? Okay, Deb, you're going for Nyrider. Yep. I listen. I'm not going to say anything. I'm not going to tell you who I went through. I think you probably can guess who I went for. But yep, Nyrider. Yep. As I say, create your own scenario as to how you came to be wrongfully convicted, and then who would be the person that you would go for. I say the one issue that keeps cropping up is Teresa Halbach still alive? And we know for a fact that Drizzen and Nyrider have basically told people just shut up about any notion that Teresa Halbach is still alive. So there's a vote for Zellner. Again, good call. Be interesting to see if anybody goes for Eric Rosie, wouldn't it? So anyway, I might, 20 years' time, I might just go for him. Anyway, getting back to Teresa still alive. How I see it is this. I get annoyed when people accuse anybody who says she might still be alive of being daft, or you're being disrespectful, or you're just in Clyde Crooker land, or you're just believing, going with some stupid conspiracy theory, simply because people do have suspicions about this case for obvious reasons. I remember when I was first introduced to the idea that Teresa was still alive. And I'm sure that I'm the same as a lot of people who thought, well, that would answer a lot of questions. That would bring a certain amount of clarity as to what the hell was going on. We know that there's this other Teresa in Canada who looks quite similar, looks very similar. Apparently one of the main issues with our lookalike in Canada, well, for me, the first problem was the fact that it was too public, calling her, somebody else being Teresa St. John or whatever. Apparently there's another issue, and that is that there's a discrepancy in height between the two people. There's also blood on the back of the RAV4, and that was clearly blood splatter and blood that was from hair. So that to me suggests that there had been some sort of disaster. Somebody has been involved in some sort of attack. But then we get things like the experts saying that because the FBI could not identify the bones, the remains, as far as the FBI is concerned, as far as presented at trial, we don't know that any of those bones were Teresa's, and there was only 2/5 of them in Steve's burn pit. Then there was the other ones found elsewhere. Clearly the state believes that those bones are Teresa because they handed them back. But I seem to recall that the sort of one bit that sort of they tried to pin it down as this is definitely Teresa, apart from obviously the rivets, a couple of rivets, was also the tooth. And I can't help thinking that, if you've got a set of teeth, if you've got a complete jaw whereby you've got all the teeth and you can see which ones are missing, which ones have got fillings, I think that's a good way of identifying a person. But if you've just got a single tooth, well, to a certain extent, a lot of teeth look quite similar. And I'm reminded of the fact that I had a couple of people comment, I think it was on the Facebook groups, when I was discussing presenting the one question from Ken Kratz, the Ken Kratz Amazon reviews and the career of Ken Kratz. A couple of people said of me, you look very similar. Are you Ken Kratz's brother? Well, a bit like teeth, there are certain similarities. We both have 2 ears, 2 eyes, a nose and a mouth. And if you're that good of a detective that you think that I could be Ken Kratz's brother, might I suggest that your talents are wasted and you should join the detective part of the Manitowoc Sheriff's Department. I'm sure they would appreciate somebody of your skill. So please don't ever say that to me. It's not a good thing. Nothing at all to do with Ken Kratz. So, as I say, I do get annoyed when people have a go at others for suggesting that Teresa might still be alive, purely on the fact that we don't have we don't have the absolute proof. This is why we need to get the remains that are left rapid DNA tested. It needs to be proven that those are the remains of Teresa Halbach. And in the meantime, anybody that gets on their high horse accusing people who think that Teresa might still be alive, don't. They're not saying it. They're not saying it because they want it to be true. Yes, it would certainly put a lot of it would show light on a lot of things. But don't criticize people. Me personally, I think, as I say, the evidence shows that somebody met with quite a nasty incident at the back of the RAV. If there's blood spatter on the back of the RAV4, the way that it was demonstrated by Zellner and her experts, I'm going to go with that. But yeah, let's just put these bones to the test, the remains that are left, and let's find out for sure. Another one, thorny issue that keeps cropping up, is this issue of is Barb somehow complicit? And I have to say, personally, I think absolutely no way. I can tell, and surely we can tell by her, during the phone calls that Brendan makes to her, when she says, "What? So you're saying that you did have something to do with it?" And she is in absolute shock. Clearly, I don't think Barb knows anything at all about what happened. And it's because of that sort of not knowing innocence that she's saying that she's sure that Bobby and Scott had nothing to do with it, because she doesn't know anything about it. She certainly didn't have the wherewithal to try and deflect the pressure that was being put on her by Uyghur and Fassbender. And of course, we can all see what they did to poor Brendan. Earlier today, it was today for me. In fact, it was even today for the dude at about coming up for 1 o'clock in the morning. He did a video based on the fact that somebody had got in touch with him they kind of rattled his cage by saying that, you know, when Making a Murderer first came out, I was near enough 95%. He didn't say 95. That Steve and Brendan were innocent, but as a result of watching a load of Eric Jose videos, he's now sort of 50-50. And that's obviously something that's that the dude is not going to just sit on. He's going to reply to a comment like that. And one of the things that the poster had put, the guy making the comment, well, the person had put, was the fact that Brendan had, how can I put this, had basically made a rod for his own back. He should have been stronger and have a little bit of Stephen Avery about him. And I do share a certain sympathy, because how many of us watching Making a Murder for the first time, seeing the interrogation of Brendan Dassey, were shaking our heads thinking, why are you agreeing with this stuff that these detectives are putting in your head? Why are you doing this? What? Shut up. Tell them you're not going to say a single word until you've got somebody present with you. But even then, obviously, Len Kaczynski would have been of no help whatsoever. But just stop talking, stop agreeing with them, because he just agreed with everything that they said. When they wanted him to change story, he would change from the shooting being outside the garage to being inside the garage, to every little detail. What they wanted, they got him to agree with. It wasn't him coming forward with the information. So I must admit, for a while there, I could not thinking that it was unfortunate that Stephen Avery was basically sold down the river by his nephew, in that Brendan had simply caved in to the pressures of being in an interrogation. And I held that opinion for quite a long time, until I watched. I did watch the True Story of a False Confession, the Drizzy Night Rider 2-hour-long video, which was very eye-opening. And then I saw a clip of. Hi, Mark. Then I watched the. In fact, Mark, you remember this, when the dude set us the task of taking a third each of the interrogation, both the video of it and the transcript. And I'm sure that we all read through the whole lot so that we could see how it all linked together. We watched the whole lot to see how Brendan was being treated. And it was then that, up until that point, I had often asked a question: at what point did Wiegert and Fassbender realize? At what point did the penny drop? We've got a guy here who doesn't know what's happening. At what point did they realize that and think, we shouldn't go on any further? And they did. Well, of course, they never stopped, did they? They just kept going. They were on a mission to accomplish what Kratz and Pargel and everybody wanted them to do. You're buffering. Yeah, it could be that sometimes the video reception can be pretty bad down here. If the screen suddenly goes blank, then I'll know it's me. But it was the end of the video when I was watching it on the Law News Network, and they were interviewing. It was Jerry Buting. It was Aaron Keller. I mean, you can accuse me of liking the sound of my own voice. That guy really likes the sound of his own voice, that Aaron Keller. Gee whiz. Anyway, at the end of it, they showed that the final bit, 20 minutes, that's shown to the jury and never was. And I must admit, that's when it kind of really hit me. And what was, I suppose what's quite funny there was that I actually tried to get in touch with Carla. Couldn't get in touch with Carla. Managed to get hold of the dude. We didn't really know each other that much, but we had a chat about it, and it's one of the many things that I am incredibly thankful to the dude for, because he is a really, really good egg. Just like Mark, except he doesn't swim with sharks. But yeah, they're both very, very good eggs, as of course is Stacy. So, as I say, when it comes to the question, is Barb complicit in any of this? Absolutely no way. I don't see that at all. Did she have the wherewithal? Did she have the means to deal with the pressures that were being put on her? No. Somewhat similar, unfortunately, to Brendan. Okay, final thorny issue would be the Halbachs. As some of you will know, I take huge issue with Mike Halbach. I don't trust him as far as any of us could throw him. And I don't think any of us should trust him at all. Pop the video into video player, and there's our case, and he's never even seen it. The grieving process could last days. He's grieving before she's even, while she's still a missing person. He's grieving because she's dead, but he's not supposed to know that just yet. But it could last days. Again, that's one of those things that then fuels the fire of is Teresa still alive? Very, very, very curious. And my big issue about this is why the journalists didn't make a thing about this, as I've kept going on about. In other cases, certainly one famous one here in the UK, when the girlfriend of the perpetrator referred to one of the girls in the past tense, immediately, that was during an interview, immediately the press was, particularly the producer of the TV crew said, we need to go to the police with this, because they need to see this. They need to hear this. She has just referred to one of the girls in the past tense, and this was, to use an American term, it was a game breaker. This changed everything. This opened the case wide up. Exactly why aren't the press doing more? Well, I think we all know that there is a crap department in Wisconsin. Corruption, racketeering, and propaganda. And the journalists are just one of the departments of the crap department. There, you've heard it from me first. Write that down. Corruption, racketeering, and propaganda. Yes, the journalists really, really do annoy me. The one genuine journalist, actually, messaged him quite a few times. He doesn't always reply. He's very busy. Pointed out that, of course, one of the local journalists regularly goes a round of golf with Mr. Kratz. I'm not saying that that's necessarily a bad thing. It might be a good thing from his sort of networking sort of point of view, but you have to wonder, don't you? It can certainly be perceived as being something that you might want to avoid doing. I'm sure they do, and I'm sure, Mark, that they've got their audience that they're pampering to, and so therefore they, why should they go out on a limb for a guy from a scrapyard and his nephew? Of course they're not. That a little bit like if you were Jim Link and Andy Colburn, one or the other, could we hand on heart say that with the pressure of the rest of the department, with their, so to a certain extent, possibly some of their sort of pensions and stuff up in the air, would we have not acquiesced to the idea of if that key was to end up in Steve's bedroom, that might help us tremendously. I'm not saying you should, but I can certainly appreciate the pressure that they were under. Well, Zelma, yes, skeptical, but then the question is, how far are they prepared to go? I suppose the problem is, if they're suspicious of what's happened, what can they do about it? Who can they turn to? It's not like you can call the A-team to come in and rectify the situation. But it certainly needs things to be stirred up as far as the reporting of it is concerned. It's a shame because John Farrack was doing a superb job, and obviously still a job. And that's another interesting thing, that a month before it was announced that the book was being released, he actually told me that he was doing this book and he was working with Kathleen Zellner, going across once a week to have a chat with her, working on the book. It wouldn't surprise me at all if he's not continuing to do that. There's been so many programs about the case, and yes, I do get. Oh, hi, Brazil. How you doing? Hope you're enjoying the sun on Copacabana Beach. There have been certainly some programs done that were I thought were very good, that did look at the some of the issues, and just sort of following up from Making a Murderer. One of the things that always struck me, and Mark, you know this very well, that driving from Two Rivers back to Manitowoc, you go along a bit of dual carriageway, and on the right hand side, I don't know if it's a business or a house, there's this huge sign saying basically, we trust you, Donald Trump. We voted you as president. We want you to know that we are behind you all the way. And I often get the impression that when you've got certain people there who they just don't want to hear anything said against their sheriff's department, their police, their prosecutors. They just don't want anybody saying anything against the state, and they will simply, yes, on a spare block, huge book, yeah, that's right. Again, propaganda, isn't it? You know, it's trust us, we know what we're doing. Things might not be 100%, but we're working on it. You can trust us. We'll get it right. Don't worry about it. Get back to doing whatever you're doing and let us take care of it. Don't worry about it. And if you're doing anything else, to a certain extent, I get this sense that people would feel that if you don't just accept that's the way it is and start criticizing, it's somehow unpatriotic. You are trying to upset the... Maybe we should pitch in for a billboard. Strange you should mention that, because I seem to remember that some group, I believe they called themselves Justice for Teresa, did just that. My suspicion has always been that it was some local people who realized that there was a huge problem, and they put up a sign wanting people to come forward with any information that they might have, purely to get justice for Teresa. And again, you watch things like, I can't remember what episode it was 4 or 5 of Making a Murder Series 2, and at the start Kathleen Zellner says, you know, this whole investigation was into Teresa's disappearance was a mess. It was embarrassing, and it's totally disrespectful to Teresa. And the least she deserves would be the correct perpetrators arrested and dealt with. So anyway, I've got a gig tonight, so I'm going to have to head off and do the gig, and we'll catch you all again. Let me just quickly, for those of you that weren't here at the start, the question that I put was, let's see how the voting goes on this. Okay, if you were wrongfully convicted and you had a choice of any of these attorneys that we're familiar with, you create your own scenario as to how you were convicted. You can include the fact that if you were a juvenile, or if you're an adult, or if there's a coerced confession involved, or if there's a bonfire and bones found. You know, just make up your own scenario. But of all the lawyers that in fact, I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll make it 11 different lawyers that you can choose from to represent you. Let's open this out a bit, because this is only fair. Your choice of attorneys, I'm just going to list them and then I must dash off. You can go for Dean Strang or Jerry Butin. You can't have both. No, you can't have both. One or the other. Steve Glynn or Walt Kelly or Stephen Drizzen or Laura Nyrider or the newly converted from the dark side, Mike Griesbach. You can have Kathleen Zellner. Can't imagine anybody wanting to go for her. Well, maybe. If it's 20 years in the future, you can even have the greatest thing over the last few years. This is 20 years in the future. He used to have his own YouTube channel. He then became a private investigator. He then went into becoming a defense attorney. He's now one of the top defense attorneys in the country. You can have Eric Ozee. And just to add one more to the list, because this is interesting, you can even have David Rudolph to defend you. Okay? So come up with your own scenario, how you were wrongfully convicted, the circumstances, how old you were, etc., etc. Zellner's daughter, that, yes. Yes, she does have a daughter. Yep, I'm sure I've seen photographs. You can't have both. No, no, and no, you can only have one lawyer. But it can be in the future. Yes, Zellner specializes in not just that, but I suppose what you could point out is that, you know, you've been wrongfully convicted. You want a big settlement. That's where maybe Kathleen Zellner would win. I know that Eric Cozy is a huge Steve Drizzen fan. In fact, in that questionnaire, I know that he struggled because when I put the question, who would you most like to meet? Of all the people in the world, who would you most like to meet? If I'd have asked that question before we went to Australia, it would have been Steve Drizzen, purely in order to hand him a T-shirt. But that option wasn't on the table now. That's why he went for Doctor Who. And he sent me a few. He sent me a whole load of comments about that video. In case you're wondering where it is, funny how we were talking about the identity of the guilter, Charles Darwin, and my suspicions that it could be Ken Kratz. I too have a character name that I go under anonymously from time to time, and of course it's Horatio Magellan Crunch. So if you search Captain Cap'n, CAP''N, Captain Horatio Magellan Crunch, you'll find that I've done a few other videos, and the most recent yesterday was a video about Eric Cozy, and what do we know about him, what do we not know about him, and he filled in a 31 question odd questionnaire. So you can go and check that out. Anyway, I'm going to say bye for now. Maybe later on tonight, I don't know, but maybe probably tomorrow I'll come back and well, certainly be interesting to see who you go for. If you put in the comments, please, who you're going to go for, and particularly useful if you put a reason why you feel that attorney is the best. Because of course you have to look at that list and think how many have actually got people out. Well, Glynn and Kelly did. But was it not that they were his civil suit lawyers? And in fact, it was the Centre for the Wrongful Conviction, headed by Keith Finlay, that actually got Steve out the first time. Yes, I'm sure that's what it was. Anyway, cheers, Mark, and see if you're ever in the vicinity, sort of Europe. Let us know, and it'd be nice to catch up again, wouldn't it? Eh? Bye for now.